What's up? I am David Long. I'm here today to bring you an excerpt from my semantic compatibilism video talking about the PreTrans Fallacy and what it is to be transrational, or as I prefer it, PostFormal. These responses are based on reactions that I've gotten from a couple different archetypes. One I would want to call maybe more orange or more modern, materialistic, scientific, more empirical, and one from more, I would say, a more green perspective, more mystical, more phenomenological. And I want to kind of try and paint what I think of as kind of an integral synthesis as a position between these two perspectives, which is what I think my semantic compatibilism is trying to do. It's trying to flesh out what a post-formal or a transrational perspective would look like. In some regard, this relates to these main archetypal masculine and feminine symbols that I sometimes use, which are the cup and the sword. The cup has to do with poetry, and it's more feminine. The sword has to do with logic and rationality, and it's more masculine and more choppy. But it also relates to what Alan Watts is talking about when he talks about Prickles and Goo.
In the history of philosophy and poetry and art, we always find the interchange of two personality types, which I call Prickles and Goo. The prickly people are advocates of intellectual porcupinism. They want a rigor. They want precise statistics, and they have a certain clipped attitude in their voices, and you know this very well in academic circles, where there are people who are always edgy like that, and they accuse other people of being disgustingly vague and miasmic and mystical. But the vague, miasmic, and mystical people accuse the prickly people of being mere skeletons with no flesh on their bones. And they say to you, you just rattle. You're not really a human being. You know the words, but you don't know the music. But this natural universe is neither prickles nor goo exclusively. It's gooey prickles and prickly goo. And you see, it all depends on your level of magnification. If you've got your magnification on something so that the focus is clear, you've got a prickly point of view. You've got structure, shape, clearly outlined, sharply defined. A little out of focus is going to go bleh, and you've got goo. But we're always playing with the two.
Imagine you're in a movie theater and you're watching Star Wars, let's say, with Prickles and Goo. So, Goo over here says something like, "Wow, this movie's amazing. I want to be a Jedi and use the Force." Prickles overhears this, and he is not happy. He says, "You're stupid. You can't be a Jedi. That's dumb. This is just a movie. That's computer animation and green screens, actors and actresses playing scenes. It's not real at all." Luckily, there was no one in the theater, so I was able to say, "Well, hold on a minute now, there, Prickles and Goo. George Lucas, he put his real thoughts and ideas into this movie. Like, this is about the human drama. There's truth to be had in this. Okay, sure, it's green screens and computer graphics, but also, you know, maybe there is something to this metaphor of tapping into the one life force or the one energy of the cosmos that connects us all. You know, maybe metaphorically you could be a Jedi. And yeah, it's just a movie." This gets me into what we call the PreTrans Fallacy. There are two versions of the PreTrans Fallacy. The first version is what Prickles over here tries to do to Goo, where he says, "You're just childish, you're just stupid." So that's one version of the fallacy, is to reduce anything
that's non-rational to childish bullshit, like maybe Freud or Richard Dawkins or people like this might do. On the other hand, the second version of this kind of fallacy is a lot of these new agey people and them thinking that all of these symbols, all of this poetry is all God, even though it's all coming from a whole bunch of different cultures. It's totally embedded in old school traditions and antiquated cosmologies, and it's not relevant to the time we live in, and these different symbols are not actually compatible with each other. So those are your two versions. You have scientists who are totally literal, and you have religious people who are crazy and totally literal. Now you can see examples of pre-trans confusion all over the place. Even these examples that I've given of Richard Dawkins and Deepak Chopra, they actually have a debate that's right here. The main discussion seems to be happening in a Spanish-speaking country, and there's some kind of crazy circus at the beginning, but the talk itself is actually pretty good. You can see how literally Dawkins is right, and metaphorically Deepak is right. But his poetry can be qualified in rational terms, like when he says, "We're the universe becoming conscious of itself." This is true in the way that Dawkins says the universe becomes conscious of itself through us, and it is us that are conscious, but the universe itself is not conscious. Consciousness is the byproduct of matter. It grows out of stuff. Or you could say, we are the universe becoming conscious of itself. So it's interesting to see how, in a sense, both Deepak's poetry and Richard Dawkins are both correct, and they just can't seem to agree. They get real frustrated with each other. So the difference between pre and trans is pre-rational translations are literal, magic and mythic. TransRational translations are metaphorical, even to the point of including what Nietzsche is talking about how we're using a bunch of metaphors to communicate. So not just understanding the poetic value of religious symbols, but the poetic value of all symbols. You have pre-conventional ideas and post-conventional ideas. You know, like a baby doesn't understand language, and so it gets indoctrinated into all of these terms, and it takes them literally for granted. Whereas someone who has a post-formal understanding, like I'm talking about, like what Nietzsche had, they might use some of these same terms that, like we're talking, like he's using to deconstruct or reveal the nature of truth, but the translation is different. The baby takes the symbols as literally true. The rational mind can see the unfounded claims in the literal reading, and a transrational reading is metaphorical, seeing deeper truths beyond the symbol. Let's think about like the tortoise and hare, for example. A pre-rational interpretation of the tortoise and the hare is to take it literally, and a post-formal way of looking at that view is to read it as a metaphor, as a set of symbols, and to say, oh, this isn't about a tortoise and a hare at all. And if you think that it is, you've totally missed the point. It's not about that. It's about you and me, and about how we live. It's about hard work and determination and focus. So I personally also prefer the term post-formal to the term transrational. Even though they're kind of saying the same thing, all of these things, post-formal, transrational, semantic compatibilism, they're all kind of getting at the same thing. I like the word post-formal. It's kind of like post-conventional, like post-formal. It's about seeing through the symbol, whereas oftentimes people get confused by the word transrational. They think it's like an open-door policy for psychics, or for this idea like there's some special information that you can get by opening your mind in a certain way or tapping into something through some meditative state or something, some kind of like illumination or gnosis that you'll get through spiritual experience, this kind of special knowledge that's beyond rationality. And that is not what transrational means at all. I know that's a prevalent idea in a lot of the New Agey kind of community, but that just doesn't fit into an integral epistemology. If you go back and you watch the epistemology video, you'll see that we actually have a methodology for how we get our knowledge, which would include how to test some of these unfounded claims. Transrational ability is about your ability to see through the symbol and the sign to what it's pointing at. And also, metaphors are not transrational like they're non-rational. Metaphors are highly rational. Like there's a right and wrong reading of the tortoise and the hare. And when I say what it's about, that makes sense. A metaphor makes sense when it's explained. And there might be multiple meanings for a metaphor, multiple entendres. And you can go through and explain rationally each of the meanings that you take out of this symbol. So when someone asks you, what do you mean? You should be able to explain what you think that means and how you think that's true. And honestly, if you can't explain what you mean by the metaphor, then you're just talking shit. You're just using words in ways that you don't understand.
A kind of word salad jargon used out of context, inappropriately, apparently uncomprehendingly.
And that's why Prickles calls you goo. You wonder what I call you goo? You wonder what I call you goo? I betcha. You wonder what I call you goo? You wonder what I call you goo? I bet you do. You wonder what I call you goo? You wonder what I call you goo? I betcha. Haha. Yeah, and that's why they call you goo. I betcha. Yeah. In case you didn't know or couldn't tell, that's my Tupac impression. Sorry. Anyways, so this is an important distinction to make. What is the metaphorical significance of these symbols? If you're going to talk about Jesus on the cross, I'm going to ask you, what do you mean by that? Like, are you talking about Jesus on the cross as a symbol for death and rebirth and dying to the flesh or the body or your ego and being reborn as the hands and feet of God in the world, letting your body be a temple for the body of Christ? If that's what you mean poetically, then I get you. That's beautiful. That's a good use of poetry. But if you think that Jesus might have been a real dude or something like that, now we're talking about history. And you should know that there are PostFormal or transrational versions of Christianity. You should check out the work of Michael Dowd. He has a really good video that I'll put right here about the universe becoming conscious of itself and what that means in the context of Christianity. His approach to Christianity is actually called Evolutionary Christianity, if you can wrap your mind around that one. Now, Jung said that dreams are private myths and myths are public dreams. So his way of thinking about this was that we can analyze the myths of cultures, and it reveals things about human psychology. Maybe human psychology at particular stages of cognitive development and the culture and the time. If we can read these symbols poetically or metaphorically, then we can definitely get something out of them. And this is where I just can't resist but share with you some Joseph Campbell. Check out this little snippet I edited together from The Power of Myth that explains exactly that, the power of myth.
Why myths? Why should we care about myths? What do they have to do with my life?
These bits of information from ancient times, which have to do with the themes that have supported man's life, built civilizations, informed religions over the millennia, have to do with deep inner problems, inner mysteries, inner thresholds of passage, and if you don't know what the guide signs are along the way, you have to work it out yourself. But once this catches you, there is always such a feeling from one or another of these traditions of information of a deep, rich, life-vivifying sort that you want to give it up.
But weren't people who told these stories and believed them and acted on them asking far more simple questions, who made the world? How was the world made? Why was the world made?
No, it's through that answer that they see that the Creator is present in the whole world. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. This story that we've just read, I see that I am this creation, says the God. Or when you see that God says he is the creation and then you are a creature, well, the God is within you and the man you're talking to also. And so there's that realization, two aspects of the one divinity. People say that what we're all seeking is a meaning for life. I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think what we're seeking is an experience of being alive, so that the life experiences that we have will have resonances within that are those of our own innermost being and reality. And so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive. And that's what these clues help us to find within ourselves. The mind has to do with meaning. In here, what's the meaning of a flower? What's the meaning of the universe? What's the meaning of a flea? It's just there. That's it. And your own meaning is that you're there. Now we are so engaged in doing things to achieve purposes of outer value. Now, we want to think about God. God is a thought. God is a name. God is an idea. But its reference is to something that transcends all thinking. The ultimate mystery of being is beyond all categories of thought. My friend Heinrich Zimmer of years ago used to say, the best things can't be told, because they transcend thought. The second best are misunderstood, because those are the thoughts that are supposed to refer to that which can't be thought about, and one gets stuck with the thoughts. The third best are what we talk about, you see. And a myth is that field of reference, metaphors referring to what is absolutely transcendent.
What can't be known.
What can't be known.
Or can't be named.
Yes.
Except in our own feeble attempt to clothe it in language. When I read these stories, no matter the culture of their origin, I feel first this sense of wonder at the spectacle of the human imagination, simply groping to try to understand this existence. Does that ever happen to you?
I tell you, mythology I think of as the homeland of the muses, the inspirers of art, the inspirers of poetry. And to see life as a poem and yourself participating in a poem is what the myth does for you.
What do you mean a poem?
I mean a vocabulary in the form not of words, but of acts and adventures, which connote something transcendent of the action here, and which yet informs the whole thing, so that you always feel in accord with the universal being.
Well, the interesting thing to me is that far from undermining my faith, your work in mythology has liberated my faith from the cultural prisons to which it had been sentenced.
It liberated my own. I know it's going to do it with everybody who really gets the message. Every mythology, every religion is true in this sense. It is true as metaphorical of the human and cosmic mystery. But when it gets stuck to the metaphor, then you're in trouble.
The metaphor being?
Well, Jesus ascended to heaven. The story is he ascended bodily to heaven. So this is metaphorical of something. You don't have to throw it away. All you have to find is what it's saying.
What do you think it is saying?
What it's saying is he didn't go out there, he went in here, which is where you must go too, and ascend to heaven through the inward space to that source from which you and all life came. That's the sense of that.
But aren't you undermining one of the great cardinal doctrines of the traditional classic Christian faith, the death, the burial, and the resurrection, overcoming the body with a higher physical truth?
Well, that would be what I would call the mistaken reading of the symbol. That's reading it in terms of prose instead of in terms of poetry. That's reading a metaphor in terms of the denotation instead of in terms of the connotation. You understand that? It's a purely literary problem.
The poetry gets to the unseen reality.
That which is beyond even the concept of reality. It's that which transcends all thought. It's putting you there all the time. And in some way giving you a line to connect with that mystery which you are. And the myths do it, by gosh, they do it. Now, according to the normal way of thinking about the Christian religion, we cannot identify with Jesus. We have to imitate Jesus, but to say, I am God, as Jesus said, is for us blasphemy. However, in the Thomas Gospel, Jesus says, he who drinks from my mouth will become as I am, and I shall be he. Wow, that's Buddhism. We are all manifestations of Buddha consciousness, only don't know it. And the Buddha, the word means the one who waked up, bod, to wake, woke up to the fact that he was Buddha consciousness. And we are all to do that. To wake up to our Jesus within us. This is blasphemy in the normal way of thinking in Christianity, but it's the very essence of Gnosticism and of the Thomas Gospel.
And heaven, that desired goal of most people, is within us?
All the gods, all the heavens, all the worlds are within us. They are magnified dreams. And what dreams are, a manifestation in symbolic images, metaphorical images of the energies within us in conflict with each other.
So when we dream, are we fishing in some vast ocean of mythology that
it goes down and down and down. What the myth has to provide, I mean, just on this immediate level of life instruction, the pedagogical aspect of myth, it has to give life models. And the models have to be appropriate to the possibilities of the time in which you're living. And our time has changed, and it's changed and changed, and continues to change so fast that what was proper 50 years ago is not proper today. So the virtues of the past are the vices of today, and that's why it's ridiculous to go back to the old-time religion. It belongs to another age, another people, another set of human values, another universe. No one had any idea. The world was a little three-layer cake, and the world consisted of something a few hundred miles around the Near Eastern centers there. No one ever heard of the Aztecs. The world changes, then the religion has to be transformed. There are a number of services that myths serve. The basic one is opening the world to the dimension of mystery, to realize the mystery that underlies all forms. But then there comes the cosmological aspect of myth, seeing that mystery as manifest through all things. So the universe becomes, as it were, a holy picture. You are always addressed to the transcendent mystery through that. But then there's another function, and that's the sociological one of validating and maintaining a certain society. But then there's a fourth function of myth, and this is the one that I think today everyone must try to relate to. That's the pedagogical function, how to live a human lifetime under any circumstances. Myth can tell you that.
To me, Joseph Campbell is the man. It's real hard to cut into anything he's saying. I highly recommend you go check out Power of Myth. It's great stuff. I think he makes it very clear the value and the beauty of mythology and the importance that it plays in our life. And some of these factors that he talks about that it's playing are things that I think science is trying to actually replace. Carl Sagan has this quote. He says, "How is it that hardly any major religion has looked at science and concluded, this is better than we thought? The universe is much bigger than our prophet said, grander, more subtle, more elegant. Instead they say, no, my God is a little God, and I want him to stay that way." A religion old or new that stresses the magnificence of the universe as revealed by modern science might be able to draw forth reserves of reference and awe hardly tapped by conventional faiths. Carl Sagan really makes this point pretty well, that modern science is fulfilling a lot of this ability to have awe about the mystery of reality through things like academia. We have our rituals to initiate new people up into the folds of adulthood. Like, a lot of these different functions are actually fulfilled in modern rational mythology. I mean, look at something like the Cosmos series. I mean, that is a mythology right there, and it's beautiful.
We know we are approaching the grandest of mysteries.
Thanks for checking out this video. If you like that and you want to see more, you can check out the rest of the semantic compatibilism video here. If you want to hear more about spiritual experiences or idealistic versus materialistic metaphysics and cosmology, or if you want to hear more about the relative nature of language, a lot of stuff is packed into this video, and it all kind of goes together. Like my videos, subscribe to my videos, and expect more videos to come. I actually want to do a whole series on PreTrans Fallacy and explore what a pre-rational interpretation of something would be like, what a rational interpretation of that same something would be like, and what a post-formal interpretation of that same thing would be like. I'm actually thinking that the first thing I might work on is tarot cards and Kabbalah.